Hi everyone, and welcome to our last week of the Food Box program. Tonight we are going to make everyone's favorite pizza from scratch. So we're going to start with the pizza dough. I've got a couple different flours here. We have white flour and a local flour which is slightly sifted. So we've got the white, the sifted flour here in this bowl. We're going to add a couple tablespoons of this instant yeast. And the great thing about this is you don't have to put this in water and let it dissolve. It can go directly into your flour. We're going to do a tablespoon of sugar. The sugar is what the yeast feeds on. The yeast is a live organism. And salt, which actually regulates the yeast production. So you do want to remember to add salt. In your box, you received all of the dry ingredients together. So you've received the mixture of flours, the yeast, the sugar, and the salt all in a little bag. So now, all you have to do is give that a stir in a bowl. We're going to add warm water to this. So not hot water, because the hot water will actually kill the yeast. So make sure that you can put your finger in it and it's just lukewarm. I'm gonna grab that right now. There we go. The warmth of the water will allow the yeast to start working. Yeast needs something to eat and it needs moisture before it will start to work. So let's take a look. We've got about 3/4 of a cup of water. We're going to start stirring it in. Don't add all the water at once. Add enough to make a dough. So let's stop there. Coming together, needs a little bit more. I'm actually going to add probably a 1/4 cup more. There we go. You want this to come together in a ball. So using a wooden spoon is really helpful. There we go. See how this is all drawn together into a ball? It looks a little bit sticky right now, but as you knead it, the flour will absorb some of that moisture. So let's take a look. We're going to clear our space here and knead our dough. Now some of you might have a bowl mixture kind of combination where you can actually use a machine to knead it, but I think most of us will just knead it by hand. So I'm going to show you the process. You might need a little bit of extra flour. The kneading process will take about 4 to 5 minutes. I'm going to show you the technique for doing this. Turning it and pushing it down with the heel of my hand. And adding a little bit more flour as needed. If you find it a little bit too sticky, then add a tiny bit more flour as you go. Now take a look, it's been about 4 minutes and the ball of dough is soft and pliable and a little bit elastic. See that? You'll notice throughout the kneading process, I pulled the dough toward me, pushed it down with my heel, and then turned it. If you do this enough, it forms a beautiful ball of dough. There we go. So now I'm going to let this dough rest for a little while we turn on our oven. So we want a nice high temperature in our oven, 450 degrees. And now, while our oven gets ready to go and our dough rests, we are going to get all of our vegetables ready. And we're back with all of the vegetables magically appearing right in front of you. We have a half green pepper and a half red pepper. This is in your box, a few mushrooms and some red onions. So we're gonna chop these up first. Whatever knife you happen to have, take the pith right out of the middle here. We don't want that stuff. I'm gonna take the middle out here. Same thing on your green pepper. I just use the tip of my knife. There we go. And then let's do this thickness. Now, a lot of the toppings are totally up to you. If you hate mushrooms, don't put it on your pizza. Put whatever you would like on. You can always save these vegetables for a different meal. So here we go. I'm gonna make mine about this thick and then do thin slices. I love a lot of vegetables on my pizza, so I'm gonna do all of these. And our green peppers, same thing. Mushrooms, if they're larger, I like to cut them in half first. Mushrooms are an excellent vegetable, by the way, for kids like my 5-year-old daughter to learn how to use a knife. So she'll use a smaller knife, maybe one of those plastic lettuce knives, and practice using the tip of her knife to cut these mushrooms. And knives go through mushrooms like nothing, so it's very easy to practice chopping and having your fingers placed in the right place. When you get more comfortable, you go a little bit faster. Now for our onion. Everyone has about this much red onion, and then I'm going to use the half rings this way. They look quite pretty this way. There we are. Here's our vegetables. The rest of our toppings consist of the pepperoni that you received in your box and a chunk of mozzarella cheese, and this is specially made cheese for pizzas. So if you have a box grater like this one, or a hand grater, or whatever you happen to have, you can grate your cheese at this point. Now we can set all of these toppings aside, and we're going to now take our dough that has rested. The gluten needs a little bit of time to relax and rest. Now it's going to be very easy to roll out and place on our pizza pan. Our dough is ready to roll out. Now, depending on whether you want thick or thin crust pizza, you could use the entire amount of dough and fit one pizza pan or something similar. Or, like I would like to do, we can cut our dough in half and make 2 quite thin crust pizzas. Now, I'm going to use a little extra flour. Little note about the flour: if you don't have any flour in your house, when you take out your mixture of the flours that I gave you for the pizza, just save a little bit on the side. You only need about 2 tablespoons of flour extra. Save a little bit of that when you start your recipe. Okay, so here's our first thin crust. I'm going to use a rolling pin for this one. Notice if it gets a little bit sticky as you're rolling, just add a bit of flour as you go. And I turn it. The idea is not to make a perfectly round pizza. The idea is to make a sort of round pizza. We're not looking for perfection. There we go. So here's our first one. Now let's take a little bit of olive oil. Everyone received a little container of olive oil. Take about a tablespoon, and you can cover the bottom of your pizza pan just by greasing it like this. This creates a nice crisp crust. And then of course it won't stick to your pan. Take your thin crust, put it right on there. And then a little bit more of that olive oil. And what this does is seals your crust so that when you put your tomato sauce on later on, it doesn't create a soggy crust. Okay, now our second piece of dough. Say you don't have a rolling pin and you think, now I've got to do this by hand. You can always use a can of something. Today we're using a can of beans. This does the job. If you're stuck, you can at least roll out your pizza with a can. It's a little bit more complicated, but it works. As long as your crust is about the same thickness all the way around. So I'm just moving some of the thicker pieces, stretching those out a bit. And then you can also stretch it out with your hands, like the pizzeria. And this stretches your dough out as well. Okay, now let's get our second can ready to go. A little bit of olive oil. Second dough, kind of spread it to the edges with your hands. A little bit of olive oil on top. Now my oven is at 450 degrees. What I'm going to do now is take these crusts and bake them for 5 to 7 minutes. That gives them a little bit of a head start. If I was to put my toppings on right now and bake it, there's a chance that the crust will get a little bit soggy on the bottom, and nobody likes that kind of pizza where you feel like, it didn't quite cook. So we give it a bit of a head start. Give it 5 to 7 minutes. It starts cooking this dough, then we can add our toppings. While we wait for our pizza crust to cook, let's make our salad dressing. So we are doing a classic Caesar salad. With classic Caesar, we want garlic. So everyone has a clove of garlic in your box. You want to take the skin off by chopping the 2 tips off your garlic, and take your knife and crush it a little bit. That helps the skin come off easily. And then if you happen to have a garlic press, you can use that, or you can chop it with any knife. As long as you go back and forth over your garlic enough, you're good to go. Just chop it until you're happy with the size. Sometimes I clean the sides of the knife. There. That's great. So we're gonna put this in our thing. Any kind of bowl will do. I'm gonna take our lemon. There might be a couple seeds in your lemon, so when you squeeze it, it helps to just squeeze it between your fingers. And then your hands can catch any seeds. Of course, make sure you wash your hands well before this. There we go. Fresh lemon and garlic. I'm gonna wash my hands again. Now we're going to do some olive oil. So you did receive that little jar of olive oil. You're going to need a little bit less than half a cup in here. There we go. And then you can salt and pepper it as you will. I just use a little bit of salt. We're going to be adding Parmesan cheese. Parmesan is very salty as it is. I love cracked pepper though, so you can add maybe half a teaspoon, a quarter teaspoon. Give that a stir. And now in your box you have a container of mayonnaise, a little bit of Dijon mustard with that. We are going to throw that in to create our creamy dressing. And finally, some of that Parmesan. So this is a powdered Parmesan. It creates a really nice taste and texture for Caesar salad. Take a look at the texture here. That's what we're going for. Not a lot of work, but you get the flavors and the experience of getting to make your own dressing. Oh, now listen, our dough is ready to go. Let's take a look at the dough. You see how it's started to rise? You've got some brown on the bottom. That's what we're going for because we want this to be nice and crisp on the bottom. So we're gonna put our dough right here. And now let's add our toppings. Now everyone received a little jar of pizza sauce in your box. You can put as much as you like on your pizza at this point. I like leaving a little bit of an edge. So as you can tell, this pizza has risen quite a bit. It's a nice fast recipe. We didn't have to let it sit for an hour and double in size and all of that. So even with letting it rest for 20 minutes like we did, it was just the right amount of time to create two pretty good sized pizzas. I'm gonna add a bit of cheese first. I like a double cheese pizza. So a bit of cheese on the bottom. Then we can add our meat and our vegetables. You can mix it up and do one quite simple and one with everything on it. That's what I'm gonna do. My kids aren't super fond of mushrooms, so I'm gonna make theirs mushroom free. But this one will be the works. There we go. And finally, the second half of your cheese. So it bubbles and cooks all together. All right. Second pizza. This time, more pepperoni. Just a few peppers, because I know my kids do like the peppers. And just a few onions. And the rest of the cheese. Now we're going to pop these pizzas back into the oven for an additional 10, perhaps 15 minutes. We'll check it as we go. As soon as the cheese is bubbling and brown, the crust is almost already done. So just a little bit of bubbling and you're ready to go. So it's been about 12 to 15 minutes. So we are going to take our pizzas out of the oven and take a look. Bubbly, and the crust is nice and brown. I'll show you the other one. See how bubbly the cheese is on this one. My kids are going to love this. So our pizza is a little bit too hot to eat right now. So we've got a few minutes. Let's chop up our lettuce, spin it, and we can make our Caesar. Each of you received a small head of lettuce in your box. Chop the end off. I turn my lettuce and I chop it lengthwise first. And then 3 centimeters. There. Now, if you don't have a spinner, I would take any kind of colander you have, rinse it really well, shake it around, and then lay it out on paper towels just to get a little bit of the moisture off. But I'm just going to spin this in my sink. Cold water. quite a bit of water out. I really enjoy having a spinner. It's something worth investing in for sure. Now we can toss this together. And of course the dressing makes quite a bit, maybe a cup and a half of dressing altogether. So I would only pour a little bit out. The rest you can store in a little jar in your fridge so you can have a couple more dinners of Caesar salad. There we go, take a look here. Creamy, delicious with that crisp romaine. Now we are ready to plate our meal. Looks like our pizzas are probably ready to go. And now to plate our dinner. So we're gonna take the pizza off the pan onto the board. I want you to take a look at the bottom here. See how we've got a nice crisp crust, not that soggy crust. Now we can use a knife just to cut through it for our nice thin crust pizza. And then we'll take our delicious Caesar salad, plate some salad on your, this is for 2, but we could very likely serve 3 or 4. So however many people you have in your household, and then we'll take a couple nice big pieces of pizza. Such a simple recipe, but with a touch of gourmet that you can impress all of your friends with. There we are. So I wanted to thank everybody for having me these last few weeks. I've so enjoyed being part of your kitchens, and I hope you learned something and can carry on doing so much of the cooking on your own. So enjoy, bon appetit.